and actually the power of these tabloids was beginning to loosen anyway. The power of the news, all the circulations are going down, with the exception of the Daily Mail. So, yeah, a declining force in some respects. As it became more competitive, as profits were more threatened, some of these practices became more pronounced. That's part of the story as well.
And in terms of the wider social media aspect, you mentioned that the newspaper's grip was loosening anyway. Do you think politicians will be more swayed by other media outlets now? And do you think this will be a genuine opening up? Or is there a danger that that too could get monopolised in some way?
Well, I mean, certainly the last few years at least testify to the growing influence of social networks, for example, as you just mentioned, Mark. When we think about the general election, for example, in this country or in the US, and how politicians capitalize on social networks like Facebook and YouTube and so forth, and to make it one of their key probably channels to disseminate the message, I think this tells a lot about what is the future with regard to where the influence of what tools to use to influence the electorate, to influence the lay people, to influence public opinion in general with regard to selling any ideology or any cause. I think this also tells a lot about the role of newspapers, for instance. And I don't say social networks will probably kill newspapers. They will not, because newspapers also are developing in a form which is becoming multimedia output or outlets themselves. When you go to the website of any newspaper, for instance, you will see that it's becoming like a television channel. They will have a Facebook link, they will have Twitter, they will have a YouTube link, and so forth. They will have even videos and so forth. They will have also blogs of some of the, I mean, interesting enough, I mean, whenever I'd like to see the development of websites of, like, for example, The Guardian or even the BBC itself, I think it's becoming like a television channel itself, or a multimedia thing. So I think all of these newspapers, in my opinion, they are not going to dwindling with regard to their influence, but social networks themselves will become a growing, or maybe probably the biggest force of influence, in my opinion. And I'm hoping this events like this, what is happening nowadays in this country, in this liberal democracy, is really going to probably put these newspapers straight on the track, to know exactly what they should be doing, to be more responsible in front of the people whom they are actually supposed to serve. Especially here when we are talking about, let's say the less educated people in society who read the Sun newspaper, who read the Mirror, who read the what have you, who are interested only in page 3 of the Sun, for instance. I mean, those people are really fed with, I shall call it, rubbish. Unfortunately, with regard to the superficiality of what's happening around us. Everything is turned into a superficial story when it comes to wars and conflicts, when it comes to election campaigns, when it comes to issues like, for example, thinking about the health service or think about education and what have you.
Just very briefly, because we're coming towards the end of this part, the Arab Spring, a lot of it, the people knew the state media, they were being fed. They didn't believe anymore, they lost faith in it, and they took power themselves, and often through other media outlets. Do you think this could be a turning point? Rather than being disillusionment following seeing all this corruption, it actually may lead to some kind of empowerment right here?
I don't know the answer. I mean, it's very difficult similes to make, because the state-run media in across the Maghreb and the Middle East is one thing. I mean, I think that in a country like Britain, there's been a free press for hundreds of years, and that there is a degree of choice for people. But what there hasn't been in the Middle East, which we've had here, is this concentration of power with very, very wealthy people, and I think that that has been one of a very, very negative and bad influence, and I think it will change. And I think people will also recoil further from. Unfortunately, I'm a journalist. It's going to be, people don't like journalists now. Right down there, you see. But people will recoil from all of this and probably think a bit more carefully in the future. And I think that. The newspaper. I totally agree with what you're saying about the ownership of the newspapers. I think they're finally, after 20 odd years of campaign, they will be proved right. There will be controls over ownership. Important, the right to reply. Also training more journalists to do proper investigative work, write proper stories. That's what we'd like to see.
Well, we'll have to end on that note. Thank you very much for coming to the studio today. Join me for the second half. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. In the second half of today's show, we'll be reflecting on a very important anniversary in the Muslim world, that of the Sebrenica Massacre, which took place in 1995. The 16th anniversary of the brutal killing of 8,000 Muslim men and boys by Bosnian Serb forces during the Bosnian War was recently marked. And as part of the memorial event, delegations from the British Muslim community travelled to Bosnia to mark what is regarded as the worst act of genocide in Europe since the Second World War. And I'm pleased to say that two of those who attended have joined us today. They are Dilwar Hussain Khan, Executive Director of East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre. Thank you for coming to the studio today. I'm also joined by Abdullah Faliq, Head of Research at the Cordoba Foundation. Welcome to the show. So you actually travelled last Monday, which was exactly 1 week today when the anniversary was commemorated. Is it the first time you went, or is this something that's been happening over a number of years for yourself?
Well, this is my second time. Last time I went with the delegation in 2007 in October. At that time, obviously, we went to Sebrenica to see the mass graves there, but alhamdulillah, this time round we managed to actually attend the event of the commemoration of this Sebrenica massacre on the 11th of July. So alhamdulillah, it was a very great experience for us. We prayed, I think, over 600 janazas. They're still finding the corpses, and
So 600 janazas. How was that done practically?
What happened during the year, I think Abdullah will be able to tell you more. During the year, the International Missing Persons Organization, they identify the bodies that are excavated from the graves, and then they get, I think, if they can get about 70% of the remains or the bones, then they perform the janaza prayer. And once they identify the body, they invite the families. And then.
So are people still having their loved ones identified?
Yes,
16 years on.
I think still so far they've only identified about how many, 6,000 or something. Abdullah can tell you more about that. So it was a really moving experience for all of us. I've never prayed in my life. 600 janazas in one go.
So was it just one mass?
One. I mean, there were 600 bodies. I mean, right. Bones, basically, that's that remains of a person there. And all the families were invited to come.
And they named each person?
Every single person was named and, verified, and the families were there, literally all of the families. That was really a moving scene where after the janaza, you see every single family there burying their dead and making prayers over them.
I think many people would be shocked to find out that actually this was the time that people were finally burying their loved ones. People in the mindset have a perception that this is something that happened 16 years ago and people are just coming to a simple ceremony, but actually people still being buried.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when the massacre took place in Srebrenica 16 years ago, when the Serbs killed a lot of the Bosnian ex-Muslims, they actually cut up the body parts so that you'll have an arm or a leg put in one city, part of another bone in another town. It's all scattered everywhere in order to avoid detection and identification. So what the International Commission...
So it was done intentionally at that time?
Deliberately, to avoid people being brought together again. So what the Commission on International Missing Persons do, they try to piece together the different body parts, the bones, the clothing, through DNA. Then once they're sure about 60-70% this is the person, they return the body to the family. So every year you have approximately 500 to 600 people who are buried together. This time round, we witnessed one family, one mother, she lost everyone, no one living remaining, everyone was killed. And after the janazah, she went to the Mufti and said, look, how do I bury my dead? I've got no one to help me. And the Mufti said, I'll be your son for today. And the Mufti, along with the Prime Minister, Bakr, they went and buried the dead person with her. So you have many families, after 16 years, in a state of shock still. How do you bury just a bone or two pieces of bone? It's a very, very gruesome reality. So this year there were 630 bodies buried together. Last year was 750. Year before was similar numbers. So every year body parts have been gathered and identified and then buried together. It's a very emotional scene.